Speaker.
Order.
Well, there's no future for that member, I can tell him.
Order. The Honourable
My
Annette King, question
Mr.
number
Speaker,
5.
is to the Minister of Finance. What programs does he consider, quote, nice to have, end quote, and should be cut?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if the opposition want an indication of it, they should look at a number of the programs that the government has cut in previous budgets. For instance, reducing funding subsidy for hobby courses and adult education, abolishing the WhatsApp badges for promoting achievement among Maori students, and reducing the tertiary tripartite funding pool by $55 million, which was just a political agreement between Labour and its union mates.
The Honourable Annette King.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. Is funding for Te Rito Family Violence Prevention Program, which helps to tackle the growing level of family violence in New Zealand, a nice to have or a necessity? If it's a necessity, why has $382,000 been cut from women's refuges from the 1st of April?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I understand that the Minister who's in charge of that, Ms Turia, is involved in a vigorous discussion with people who are providing family violence services. And I would say this, the parts of that program that don't work are nice to have. The parts that do work are necessities.
The Honourable Annette King.
Is having advocates for vulnerable children and young people who witness family violence, who've had their funding cut, a nice-to-have program? And what is the likely impact of these cuts on hundreds of children?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think this is an area like many others where it's important to be able to have sensible discussion about what works and what doesn't. And I understand on that issue there are a range of views among people who understand the issues about whether it works or doesn't work. We are not going to shy away from discussing the effectiveness of hundreds of millions of dollars of social programs, some of which work, some of which don't.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. Is the $13 million allocated to TPK for whānau engagement over the next 2 years a nice to have, or will this funding be redirected to necessities like skill training, for example, so young Māori can get a job rather than to pay for a family meeting?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the government is doing a very good job of rearranging the funding around skills training. We discovered that a lot of the money Labor had committed to skills training was resulting in thousands of young people getting 0 credits and no qualifications. So we're reallocating it to much more effective skills training.
The Honourable Annette King.
Mr. Speaker, why are budget advisory services effectively having their funding cut at a time when these services are seeing almost 5 times the number of families they are funded for, and having families sent to them by work and income under this government's policy? Is it because they are nice to have?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think as is evident from the exchange, when the member says effectively cut, does that mean it's less than what Labor promised them 3 years ago or something? If the member's trying to give the impression that the government is cutting funding to social services, she is wrong. This government has committed hundreds of millions over the last couple of years to dealing with the effects of recession, but at the same time as spending more, we make no excuse for good scrutiny, thorough scrutiny of which programs are working and which aren't. Good intentions are not enough.
Point of order, the Honourable Annette King.
I seek leave to table a letter from the National Collective of Women Refugees to the Deputy CEO of MSD, asking for an explanation as to why they have had $380,000 cut from family violence programs, from advocates for children and from family violence education fund. Evidence that cuts are happening.
Order, leave us sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection. Question number 6. Oh, beg your pardon, supplementary question is it? The Honourable Shane Jones.
To the Minister of Finance. Why is spending $2 million on a plastic waka the highest priority government spending when he is cutting $55 million from industry training for young Māori on the basis that it is a nice to have?
The Honourable Bill English. Order, point of order, the Honourable Tariana Turia.
Mr Speaker, I wonder if that member realises that we spent $33 million
No, order.
By Labour.
Order. When the House realises I'm on my feet, there'll be some silence. But no, that is not a point of order. The Minister, the Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I think that is a very good point. Why did the Labor government spend $33 million on the, what do you call it, the America's Cup yacht, which apparently is going to show up here sometime? The project the member refers to is a pavilion, not a waka. And actually, when New Zealand is on the world stage, with billions of people watching the third largest sporting event in the globe, we want to present New Zealand positively so that everyone sees us as a country that is progressive, multicultural and economically robust.
Order. The Honourable Shane Jones.
To the Minister. To the Minister, if a plastic waka is such a high priority...
I apologise, member. Now, I say to the government members on this occasion, I simply cannot hear with that level of noise. The Honourable Shane Jones.
To the Minister, if a plastic waka is such a high priority for government spending, why did he not give any consideration to tendering for such a contract?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, in the first place, most of the money for the project the member is talking about is actually coming from cancelling other projects. And I think that is, in the current environment, that's as it should be. And of course, the building of it will be tendered.
The Honourable Shane Jones.
Why does the Minister think this $2 million Tupperware gift, or in this case Tupperwaka gift, is actually going to improve the daily lives of the members of the Ngāti Whātua Iwi?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the Ngāti Whātua Iwi seem to believe it will improve the daily lives of their members, as well as they are keen participants in showcasing New Zealand to the world. And despite the fiscal constraints, the government is not cutting back the Rugby World Cup budget. We want to do a good job of it.
Point of order.
Point of order, the Honourable Shane Jones.
Sir, is there any dim prospect that we can get a proper answer, given that most of the information given to us comes from Ngāti?
Now, the Honourable Member will get to his feet and apologise for that abuse of the point of order system, because I was on my feet and he just carried on regardless. And we made it very clear to members that when I'm on my feet, they are to stop. So I asked the member to apologise to the House for that. The Honourable Shane Jones.
Sir, apologise for speaking while you're on my feet. Apology, Mr Speaker.
I thank the Honourable Member. The thought of being on the Honourable Member's feet was all a bit much for the Speaker for the moment. The Honourable Trevor Mallard, point of order.
One of my feet anyway. Mr Speaker, I think there are 2 points that I'd like to make. The first of all is during that the Leader of the House interjected, and secondly, we didn't take it up at the time because we thought you were going to deal with it, but Tariana Turia also did not sit down when you stood up. She continued.
Order. There will be no interjections, or the Minister will be leaving the chamber. There will be no further interjections. The point the member makes is not unreasonable. I accept that I have probably been a little bit tougher on the Honourable Shane Jones, but that happens from time to time. I'm not unaware of that, but I warn government ministers, all government ministers, when I'm on my feet, there will be no interjections, and they will cease speaking and will resume their seats when I get to my feet, because I do it for very good reason. And so I accept that the score may be a little against the opposition at the moment on that count, but I'm aware of that. Supplementary question, Honourable John Boscawen.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister of Finance. Does he agree with his colleague, Peter Sharples, that the $1.9 million plastic waka is, quote, authentically Maori? And does the government have any plans for other authentic Maori plastic fantastic inflatables?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I don't think it should be any surprise that when New Zealand is on the world stage showcasing this country to a global audience, that there will not be some Maori content. And if the member is advocating there should be no Maori presence, I have to tell him that is not New Zealand.
Supplementary.
Te ororo flavel.
Thank you, Mr.
Supplementary
Speaker.
question?
Yes, thank
Te
you.
ororo flavel.
Then Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, can I just check, does the Minister of Finance agree that it's rather inconsistent for the Labour Party to criticise an investment of $2 million in a waka cultural centre?
Order. I invite the honourable member to reword his question, because the minister has no responsibility for what the Labour opposition might think.
Okay.
Te ororo flavel.
Could I ask if the Minister of Finance has seen any reports that might indicate that it's inconsistent for the Labour Party to criticise a $2 million investment in a waka cultural centre while a party in this Parliament, namely Labour, invested $33 million in Team New Zealand waka?
Before I call the Minister, I just alert him that the question is very marginal because the Minister has no responsibility for Labour opposition views at all, but I'll allow the Minister to answer it so long as he's careful. The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, as Minister of Finance, I would dearly love to cancel the Team New Zealand funding of $33 million, because it is a nice to have and there are necessities we need to fund. But the contract signed by the Honourable Trevor Mallard was so tightly specified we have to honour it, despite the fact that it is a very low priority.
The Honourable John Boscawen.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister of Finance. How can it be appropriate for Cabinet to vote funding for a plastic waka to the largest hapu in the electorate of the Minister of Maori Affairs at a time when polling shows he is in danger of losing his seat to Labour, when an election is imminent, and without even putting the project out to tender?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, of course the building of this pavilion, which is going to look like a waka, will be tendered.
Question number 6.